I have had too much noise today, so you're going to end up on headphones, and I don't know if it's going to help or hinder. Currently, I was thinking that I was going to work on a project that I have at least 2 months to complete. And I thought this is a great idea because 2 months from now, if I completely butcher this project and it doesn't work out, I'll be fine. I have time to fix it. I have time to redo it. Like the variety, the versatility. Oh my gosh, look at how much time she's using, how wisely she's using it, and the time management skills. Immaculate chef's kiss. However, my mother mentioned going strawberry picking tomorrow. So I'm going to make an outfit for tomorrow. Essentially, the idea here is that we're going to be making a pinafore. I have another one that is the example, at least for the top half, but then the bottom needs to be flowy, because if you're going to go strawberry picking, you gotta have some whimsy, you gotta have some fun, frilly, exciting adventure aspect. We're going for something that is mildly complex. It's still simple in overall theme. It is simply a berry picking outfit. So the very first thing that you're going to notice is the tripod making the creative choice to tilt the camera further down and to the side, so what I'm doing is still visible, but just at a slightly less comfortable viewing vantage point. Enjoy that. Next, what you're going to do is use a measuring tape to make some notes on the widest and narrowest parts of the piece that you're tracing. It's also important at this point to make note of how the item you're going to trace is constructed. Is it all one piece? Is it multiple? General shapes, curves, additional darts, or seams that are for function versus aesthetics? You definitely don't have to measure. You can eyeball this or use fabric chalk to trace a pattern directly to your fabric. However, in this instance, I know that I actually liked how this bodice fit me, so I wanted to recreate it exactly with a pattern of the exact design so I can play around with it more because I know that I'll use it again in the future. What you can also do is create a mock-up from fabric, which you can do by tracing the clothing item directly onto the fabric versus making a paper pattern. I was, by my own decision, crunched for time, so I didn't bother with a mock-up to ensure that my pattern was actually a good tracing, and I just prayed that it would turn out okay. And spoiler alert, it did. The other tip I want to slip in here as well that will become relevant later is that you can absolutely use tissue paper or another form of formal tracer paper to do the pattern designs on. I just used copy paper because I wanted to have a slightly more durable copy of my pattern since I know it's going to be getting some wear and tear, and if I need a tissue paper copy, I can easily trace one from these in the future. But you absolutely are not required to trace your pattern onto copy paper. I am not the boss of you, do whatever you want. The next thing I did was actually create a design sketch for what I wanted based on a skirt pattern that I had already, paired with the measurements and general shape of the base bodice that I could reference, where they attached the straps and how the bodice panels are shaped without having to pull out the dress that I was copying off of every single time. Since the original dress has a busy pattern fabric material, it's kind of hard to see the bodice panel shapes at first glance, so again, it really helped me save time to have the sketch rather than the original piece to reference. Wow, look at those sketches. It's almost like she got a degree in archaeology. I was a top student in university for doing artifact sketches. I know, it shows. Okay, so now you can see me actually tracing out my pattern from the original pinafore onto the pattern pieces, and since I already explained some of that, I'm going to tell you a story. You're going to see me sketching and go, wow, you are so good at drawing square shapes, and thank you so much for noticing. I am. When I was in elementary school, every year on Pi Day, they did a competition to see who could draw the best circle, because it's Pi Day, like pi, the number, the way you calculate the area of a circle, that pi, and whoever did the best circle would get an extra piece of pie at lunch. Look, it was a school-wide competition. I think they may have babied us and let there be a winner from each class, but I just know that in my class, it got heated. It was one of the biggest competitions of the year. I had friends who practiced all year waiting for March 14th to come around so that they could win. And you know what? Every year I was absolutely the worst at drawing a circle. It was always draw a perfect circle and never draw a square with a perfect quarter-inch border. My talents were wasted in school. Anyways, once you have your pattern pieces traced and their measurements checked, because we measure twice, cut once in this household, you're going to cut out your pattern pieces, and if you don't have a prehistoric stone tool lying around to cut with, I guess you can just use scissors. Okay, visually this is way more space than you need right now. However, what I've just done is I've managed to create some pattern pieces for the top. We are going to do our best to not need to use a mock-up because I'm not doing that in 24 hours. The issue I've run into, my dilemma, is that what I planned with the skirt... Hold on. There is a pattern printed on top of a pattern. Yes, this is a classic style. You use tracer paper on top of this, you trace the pattern from the sheet, and then you can use whatever pieces you need. I will also say the instructions are incredibly vague, but the issue here is that I don't have spare paper right now. Solution. I might look for some old tissue paper. I feel like future me is going to deal with this in a voiceover. She will not. I do just want to make a note that you can use a mock-up, a thin fabric on top of this because it is dark enough ink. You really can see it through most thin white or sheerish fabrics and make your mock-up. And that's probably what it's encouraging you to do. It's just, why is there so much paper? Always clean up your workspace before you try cutting fabric on it, especially if your workspace is the floor of a shed. So here I'm just tracing the pattern pieces I need onto some tissue paper, and since I already explained to you why I'm doing that, you probably don't need me to repeat the instructions. And also the way I hunched over to do this reminds me of a pet turtle I had when I was like 13. I don't really remember how we got her. We had a backyard pond, so she could have just shown up one day or been rescued from the side of the road or given to us by someone who didn't want their pet turtle anymore. Regardless, we named her Olivia, and she was there for like 2 years. And at one point she laid an egg, but she laid it like underwater, and I'm no expert, but are turtles supposed to do that? Because the general consensus at the time was no. I never really got a firm answer on that, and the egg never hatched, so I'm not even sure if it was an egg or if it was just a weird spherical lump in the bottom of our pond that never turned into anything cool, and eventually we took it out and threw it away because it started to look too weird. Just get prepared for a lot of really glamorous shots of me crawling on the floor. I'm sure it's gonna look great. To begin, lay out your fabric onto a clean, flat surface, in this case our nicely swept shed floor. Check that your fabric is folded over evenly and then begin placing your pattern pieces onto the fabric. Wow, I've said fabric so many times just now, it's starting to sound like a fake word. When you lay your pattern pieces down, because I'm certain that you're making this along with me, you want to be sure that you're leaving a small gap of space between pattern pieces and each other, as well as the pattern pieces and the edge of the fabric. Lay out your pieces and decide if they all fit under the fabric. If not, get more fabric. And if you can't get more fabric, well, I don't really have a great solution for you, Chief. The advice here has been sketchy at best thus far. Did anyone even check my qualifications? Like, I made a split-second decision to make a dress in 24 hours. Does that seem like something a competent person would do? Or at least someone you would consider taking advice from would do? I don't know how much you should trust me. You might notice here that I don't put all of my pattern pieces onto the fabric before I decide to start cutting. And that is because I didn't feel like it, and I'm running this show. You're the one choosing to put blind faith in me. Do as I say, not as I do. And oh, yep, that is me, dropping the pin jug all over the floor. Thanks for noticing. I did try the pieces on the dress form, and initially it looked like there was a weird side gap, so I cut a piece that fit that, and about 30 minutes later I realized I didn't need that extra piece at all, and my patterns were actually correct, so oops. Honestly, I left this clip in just so that I could show you what not to do. Voiceover me knows better than past me did, so I'm just cutting out the audio in this section. Put your pieces on the dress form pinned together, and definitely do not panic because it doesn't fit together properly, and add 2 extra fabric pieces that you don't need because you probably just pinned it together poorly and it'll work out just fine. Next thing I did was sew together all of the bodice panels. I'd recommend using a serger to finish the seams, especially if you're using fabric that easily frays like I am. Here I've pulled up a YouTube tutorial on how to restring my sewing machine, which honestly had some super useful tips in it, and the guy doing it was clearly from New Zealand, and for whatever reason that made me 25% more likely to pay attention to his instructions. This might surprise you, but I am not from New Zealand. If I have a good instruction though, I hope you'll still listen to me. However, the other 90% of stuff that I say is typically irrelevant to the topic at hand, so you can disregard that. Next, I began combining the pieces of my skirt panels, and for this bit, if you have the same pattern as I do, which I don't know the odds on because mine came from a pretty old collection of patterns, but if you do, you should absolutely ignore the written instructions, especially on how to do the pockets because they are horrible. Sew the pocket panels together so that they make a little L of a pocket seam. This pocket was cut on a fold, so I only had to sew one side of the L and then attach the 2 sides that you didn't sew together to the skirt. I kind of hope that no one's actually trying too hard to follow the instructions of this video because my instructions have been mid-level at best. Here I sewed together 2 halves of waistband that I realized I didn't need because my skirt was going to attach directly to the bodice, and then proceeded to have to seam rip a very large section to fix this error about an hour later when I realized it, and also had to undo all of the pleating and pinning of those pleats that I had to do because I attached them at the same time as I did the waistband, and don't do that. At some point in this process, you want to sew your skirt panels together, wrong sides facing each other, so your skirt can double as a parachute in the event that you fall off something high or just want a less boring, more dramatic way to go down a flight of stairs. It's tomorrow. Because I started working at 3 p.m. yesterday, and I still have time before we're going today to do this, I think that I get to qualify it as within 24 hours. I think it qualifies as less than a day, even if, like, you know, day-wise it technically isn't. Whatever you want to call that. I get to make the rules. So I'm going to call it 24 hours. Basically, the pockets, waistband, and the straps all needed to be cut out. The straps I need to do this morning, and those are super easy. You're just gonna cut out 2 little noodles. The only thing I don't have a pattern for yet is the straps. So I'm going to measure this out and chop it off at both ends. Do that twice, fold it in half, and make a little tube in a minute and make it a sleeve. Future me, I'm giving you a task. You're gonna have to explain that. Okay, fine. Quickest tutorial this side of the Mississippi on how to make a strap. First, you're going to use your dress cheat sheet to see how long of a strap you're needing. I think the measurement I had was 16 inches, and on average, a dress strap is pretty dependent on the height of the individual. So using a measuring tape to get an estimate of where you want the bodice to sit on your torso is a good place to start if you don't have a dress you're already working from. You'll want to cut a rectangle shape, double the final strap width, plus a ½ inch. For an inch wide strap, you want a 2½ inch wide rectangle. For an 1½ inch wide strap, you want a 3½ inch wide rectangle. If I have enough fabric and I'm uncertain how the dress is going to fit, I make this an inch longer than I need to just so that I have space to readjust. It's almost always easier to trim off excess.
And following the lines on this should be helpful, right? But then you also have to bank on the fact that you are in fact cutting your right angles correctly and perfectly straight, which is not always the case. Noodles. Pin your noodles in place. Technically, I probably don't need to pin them in place, but knowing me, I probably should just because I don't think I can trust myself. Who came up with this project?
Once you cut your rectangles, you'll want to fold them in half, right sides facing each other. Then make a seam running lengthways down the strap. You should end up with a fettuccine noodle of fabric with 2 open ends.
It's not working. It's not going any better. Arguably, it's going worse.
Next, you'll turn your fettuccine noodle inside out so the right side is visible. You'll end up with a slightly deflated fabric snake that you should iron down until it lays flat.
You don't want to break out the iron. Just warm up your hands. And smooth. Look at that. Perfect. It's like I ironed it. I didn't.
Then you can attach it to your dress bodice. Try it on and adjust strap positions as necessary. I definitely made a mistake. When I pinned it onto the form initially, I saw that there was a gap between where the pieces met. I was correct initially, so I made an extra piece to fit into that space and didn't need to. Didn't need either of these pieces that I cut out. I got that fixed though and did it right the first time, so I guess the moral there is go with your gut. I measured twice, I cut once, and then I thought I still did it wrong. I did try and fix it, so there is probably going to be footage that I'm going to have to say, don't do this, because I sewed pieces on that didn't need to be sewed on, but it's fine. Aside from that, I have the top made, aside from the straps. Then the skirt, I ended up having pocket problems. I followed the pattern like so. So I'm just going to take out the pockets to make sure that they remain in the spot that I really want them to be. That was the image I was going off of. I'm probably just going to wing it. Okay, voiceovers are back, and I'm here to tell you I sewed on a zipper to the bodice. It wasn't pretty, I'll have to go back and fix it later, but there's a zip, boom, did it. This is it, the part we've all been waiting for. Time to cross your fingers and toes that you won't break a sewing needle punching through 4 to 5 layers of relatively thick flannel as you attach the bodice to the skirt. And then sew that same seam again, just for good measure. Or in case you maybe didn't use up as much seam allowance as you were supposed to the first time, but I'm not speaking from experience or anything. Finally, pin your hemline. I did a rolled t-shirt hem just because the fabric was trying to fray so much. From here, you can hem your skirt to be as short or long as you would like with a simple hand hem stitch. And there it is. You did it. Or I did it. I guess I don't really know if you did it at all, but congrats if you did, and if not, thanks for staying along for the ride. Now, for the obligatory berry picking fashion shoot. We did it! With this project, there are some things I'd like to change. So the things that went well with this project were that my image of what I was hoping for translated really well into reality. It wasn't overly complicated, but I am glad that it worked out as well as it did. Another thing that went well was that I actually completed it in the time frame that I set for myself. I did already have the fabric, so there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that I needed to get. Technically, I did take 2 different days, but I started at like 3 p.m. the first day, and then I stopped working at 8, so it definitely took me well under 24 hours to finish the whole thing. Things that didn't go so well in this project were some of the instructions for the pattern I actually did have. Also should have just gone with my gut that my pattern piece that I made was actually correct and that I didn't need to make any alterations. So definitely trusting my instinct on that. I will also say having a dress form is super helpful. My dress form is just the tiniest bit bigger than what I need it to be. When I put some of this on, it was a little bit bigger even when it looked like perfect on the form. Another thing was the fabric itself. The fabric of the dress I made the pattern off of is quite thick. This is kind of a soft flannel cotton, and so it is a little bit stiffer and definitely a little bit heavier of fabric. The middle panel is really the only one I had a significant issue with. Basically the very top kind of curves, and that curve likes to flop down. This is where my mom had some good advice to finish out this dress and make it like a much better final piece. I'm going to be adding some interfacing to help stiffen the fabric. The material of the other dress is, I didn't think it was that different. It has, I guess, a slightly bigger seam allowance at the top, so I could add that to the pattern so that it helps weigh it down better. Maybe I needed to do it slightly deeper than I did. They used a serger on this one, and this definitely needs a serger. Things that aren't necessarily a negative, but things that I would like to maybe make adjustments on. I would like to add a front pocket. I had it as a potential on the design sheet and I just wasn't sure. I think I'll add that after the fact. One of my best friends also suggested that I should add 2 big buttons on the straps, kind of like false overalls. I think that's a great idea. But other than that, the main design of the dress really was what I wanted it to be. It is a little longer than I was intending it to be, but the day that I wore it, it was actually really windy, and the fact that it was a little longer was really beneficial. Oh, and the pockets are perfect. I was kind of worried that they were an odd shape and maybe they wouldn't hold everything. I'm also notoriously bad about having my phone in my pocket, especially with hoodies, and I will bend over to do something and it will always fall out. Without fail, no matter what I do, these pockets, I bent down, I was on the ground, I was in the mud, I was doing all sorts of different weird, crazy positions to try and not have to step in mud puddles, to try and get different berries. And I did not drop my phone once, and it was in my skirt pocket the entire time. Very happy with the pockets. But yeah, for the most part, I think I really like it, and I was really glad that I got it done, and it felt very nice to like finish a project so quickly. I don't know what I'm gonna work on next, but I guess you're gonna find out soon. Bye! Set it down. Good gracious, I'm showing every bad sewing habit I ever have had in my life.